안내 말씀드리겠습니다.
May I have your attention, please? We'll soon begin the International Forum on Air Quality Improvement to 2024. Please make your way into the hall to start the session. Thank you.
행사에 앞서
Before we begin, please turn your devices into silent mode. Every year, we hold International Carbon Neutrality Conference Forum, and we finished day one yesterday. And today, we are going to focus on our forum around air quality improvement. Once we are settled, we'll start today's event.
안녕하십니까?
Hello, everyone. I am Ko Wan-bae, head of the Air Quality Policy Team of Chungcheongnam-do Provincial Government, the MC of today's event. First of all, I'd like to extend my gratitude to everyone participating in today's forum. Let me go over today's proceedings. First, we'll start with opening remarks by Director Do Jung-won and keynote presentations, panel discussions, and Q&A. Then we'll officially start the International Forum on Air Quality Improvement 2024. First, let me introduce distinguished guests today. When I call their name, please welcome them with a big round of applause. First, chairing the panel discussion, we have a former chair of the National Council on Climate and Air Quality, Kim Young-pyo. And presenting the first keynote address, we have Ken Alex all the way from the U.S., Director of the Center for Law, Energy and the Environment at Berkeley Law School. And we have, for the second keynote presentation, we have Senior Researcher Sim Chang-sub from the Korea Environment Institute. Now, let me introduce the 6 panelists participating in the discussion. Senior Researcher Kim Kyung-hwan from Korea Institute of Science and Technology. Board Member Sizu Ryo from the Sequoia Climate Foundation in Beijing. Director Fabi Pumia from the International Institute for Essential Services Reform in Indonesia. He will join us soon, and I will introduce him later on once he comes. And Vice President Lee Hee-gun from the Korean Society for Atmospheric Environment. Provincial Researcher Kim Jong-bum from the Chungnam Institute. And last but not least, Director Do Jung-won from the Atmospheric Environment Division of Chungcheongnam-do, the organizing body of today's forum. Now we'll hear the opening remarks from Do Jung-won.
Good morning. I am Do Jung-won, Director of Atmospheric Environment Division of Chungcheongnam-do. You came all the way to BUYEO, and I hope you are enjoying this season of autumn. And I would like to express my appreciation to all the participants of today's forum. 2024 International Forum on Air Quality Improvement is about the criticality of fine dust, and we have started this forum since 2017. And this year, we are also having 2024 Carbon Neutrality International Conference. And we have Mr. Ken Alex from Berkeley Energy Center, and also Mr. Shim Chang-won, and also Mr. Kim Kyung-wan, the senior researcher at the Korea Institute of Science and Technology, and Mr. Shi-Ping Liu, Director of Sequoia Climate Foundation, and Mr. Lee Hee-kwan, Vice President of Korea Society for Atmospheric Environment, and Dr. Kim Jong-bum from Chungnam Research Institute. We have great guests today. Like you already know, Chungcheongnam-do is not that it has many industrial sites related to fossil fuels because of its environmental region condition, and we are also close to China, and we have many environmental pollution, and there are also relevance with the distance with China, and these days fine dust level has decreased, but still there are atmospheric pollution that are still generated in Korea, so we also need to have plans to reduce this pollution that are generated in Korea. If you look globally, this had been discussed yesterday during carbon neutrality conference, and it is very important that the local government feels the needs of this strategy. And Mr. Kim Tae-eum is also chair of the Asia Pacific activity, and Chungcheongnam-do is gaining interest and attention because we are very actively working on this issue. Because in 2018 and 2019, fine dust was very serious problem, and Korean people were very much concerned with the fine dust issue, which is a number one carcinogen. And Chungcheongnam-do became the first organization that took part, and we wanted to participate in this process, and we made our target, which is much lower than our national target, which is much stronger than the national target of carbon emission reduction. And because of this strengthened initiative, we have reduced about 30% of our emission, and also the Ministry of Environment had revised the law based on our performance. And as a local government, we have acknowledged by the global society about our accomplishment, and there are many industrial sites that are generating air pollutions, and there are many SMEs that are voluntarily trying to reduce the emission, and we have reduced about 43% compared to 2017. And from now on, the role of local government will be more important. And I think we are on a critical point. So through this forum, I hope we can hear about your opinion, your important opinion, and I hope we can make ideas from your opinions for our future plan and strategy. And also, participants in the floor, please feel free to ask questions, and I am hoping for good opinion and idea from the participants and panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opening remarks. Yesterday, according to the Global Meteorological Agency, it is the first time seeing the extreme weather conditions. And today, one area had a snow unexpected area due to the unexpected weather changes. At this point, it is meaningful that we are having this forum on air quality improvement, and I think much effort is needed. And I was not able to introduce him when he is here, so he just came to the forum. Director Fabi Tumia from the Institute for Essential Services Reform in Indonesia. Please welcome him with a big hand. Now we'll go to the keynote presentations. We have a simultaneous interpretation available. Please tune into the channel of your preference. First, keynote presentation will be done by Ken Alex, Director of Project Climate Center for Law, Energy, and the Environment. The title is Improvement Policy in U.S. and California.
Great, thank you. And do I have slides? Do we have some? Okay, perfect. Good morning. I took a long walk this morning, and the air quality was quite good. So you're making progress. I'm going to talk to you this morning about the United States and the Clean Air Act in the United States and its relationship to California, which is extremely complicated. So the Clean Air Act in the United States is about 300 or 400 pages long and covers everything that you can imagine in terms of mobile sources like cars and heavy-duty vehicles, but also stationary sources of all kinds. And it goes into a great deal of detail. In addition to the 300 pages of law, there are hundreds and maybe thousands of pages of regulations. You can take a class in law school that is just about the Clean Air Act. So in my 15 or 20 minutes this morning, I probably will not cover all of it, but I'll give you a little bit of history of how it came to be and the very special relationship between the state of California and the federal government in the United States. So long ago, we didn't have the word smog, and so smog is a combination of the words smoke and fog in English, and the biggest location on the planet for smog outside of the killer fogs in London long ago was really primarily in Los Angeles, California, which is where I grew up as a kid. So in 1947, Los Angeles had already started to worry quite a bit about air pollution, and they created an air pollution control district that had some authority over trying to reduce the impact of smog in the Los Angeles basin. Los Angeles is surrounded by mountains, and there's an inversion layer, as we call it, that keeps particulate matter and smog at a low level where people live. So it wasn't until the 1950s that it was determined that the primary source of smog, particularly in Los Angeles, but elsewhere in the world, was the emissions from cars. And as you may know, California is famous for its driving culture and having a lot of cars and driving everywhere. I see that some of that has been exported to South Korea. But in Los Angeles in the 1950s, there was no air pollution control on any of the vehicles, and so cars would spew a lot of smoke and a lot of particulate matter without any controls. So in 1964, quite a while ago, the state of California passed the California Clean Air Act, really the first piece of legislation in the United States that systematically tried to deal with the issue of air pollution, and again, primarily from cars. In 1967, the United States passed its own Clean Air Act that was based to large extent on what California had done 3 or 4 years ago before. And so in the U.S. Clean Air Act, there is a special provision that allows California to set its own clean air requirements, particularly in connection to tailpipe emissions from cars. California is the only state in the United States that can do that, but other states, and you probably know there are 50 states in the United States, any of the other states can adopt either the federal regulation or the California regulation. So oftentimes for pollution emissions from cars, there are two separate standards, a federal standard and a California standard. And usually about 20 or 25 states adopt the California standard and the other states use the federal standard. But a lot of times, car makers actually only follow the California standard because they don't want to make two types of cars. And that's true for Korean car makers as well as American and car makers from around the world. So California has that authority, and I'll talk about in a moment that California also has some ability to set standards for greenhouse gas emissions under the same law. That's a little controversial, and I'll talk about why in a second. So, this is a famous case in the United States that went to the United States Supreme Court. The state of Massachusetts adopted California's rules, and California had regulated the emissions of greenhouse gases, primarily CO2, from cars. Now, this gets a little complicated, but what the Supreme Court said was that under the Clean Air Act, the Federal Clean Air Act, that greenhouse gases such as CO2 are pollutants. Now that's extremely important under US law, because if it's a pollutant, if CO2 is a pollutant, then the federal government and California can regulate those emissions. So there's a new Supreme Court, and they have devised a new rule that they've created that's called the major question doctrine. And again, it's complicated, so I don't want to get into too much detail. But what they've determined is that if it's a major issue and Congress has not directly allowed the federal government to act, then it may not be possible for the federal government to act. So the new Supreme Court may view this issue differently because the Clean Air Act does not explicitly say that greenhouse gases are pollutants. We don't know yet, and that will take a few years before that happens. But meanwhile, California, regardless of whether the federal government takes action, has its own laws and its own ability to regulate greenhouse gases. So, next week, you might be aware that the United States has a presidential election. Which presidential candidate is elected will have a very profound and significant impact on clean air policy and clean air laws in the United States. So former President Trump does not believe that climate change is real, and he has tried to halt California's authority to regulate greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act. Meanwhile, Vice President Harris is from California, and she's extremely supportive of the California rules and possibilities. There's another aspect of the Clean Air Act that's quite important here, which is that every state has to create a plan to reduce emissions and reduce pollution from all kinds of sources, particularly stationary sources like coal plants, similar to the ones that you have here in Chungnam. So there are coal-fired power plants, there are gas-fired power plants, and there are other sources of emissions. And there are areas in the United States that are called non-attainment areas. Non-attainment areas include Los Angeles because they're required to reduce their air pollution emissions below a certain set of levels, whether it be for NOx or SOx or PM10 or PM2.5, particulate matter 10 or particulate matter 2.5. If you're out of compliance with those requirements, then the federal government can force the state to take further and further action, and the state, including California, then has to go and require polluting companies to take greater action for pollution control. Well, Trump and Harris have very different views of how to enforce those rules, and it will have a very significant impact on pollution requirements throughout the United States, depending on which person is elected, and what enforcement mechanisms will be used. And you can probably decide who will be more aggressive about enforcing one or the other. All right. So going forward, if former President Trump is elected, which is a real possibility, amazingly enough, California will be in a position to continue to have a certain amount of independent authority, and I would anticipate that its efforts to reduce emissions will increase. California is a bit of a contrarian in the United States. As I said, California has independent authority to act, but using that independent authority is different than using the Clean Air Act authority, because the independent authority can only be applied in California, and other states cannot adopt those rules unless they go through their own state legislatures, which will be difficult. So I've noted here an attack on California waivers authority. In order for California to set its own rules under the federal law, the federal government has to approve what's called a waiver for California. President Trump, when he was in office 8 years ago, denied California's waiver, and California sued him to allow it to do its own work. So we'll see what happens. That will be a long-fought and hard-fought legal battle, which will go through all the way to the Supreme Court. Again, when President Trump was in office 8 years ago, California became much more active internationally, including with China in particular. California has a long history of working closely with China on air pollution issues, particularly a lot of scientific exchanges with the California Air Resources Board, as well as cap and trade. And we anticipate and certainly would hope and expect that that work would continue with China, with Europe, with hopefully with South Korea, and many places around the world, and California would be very open to doing so. California has a cap and trade system, which applies to both greenhouse gases and also to other forms of air pollution, particularly in the Los Angeles basin, and has very specific rules about many greenhouse gases, including methane, which we talked about quite a bit yesterday. California has one of the most extensive rules and laws about reduction of methane over the next few years, and that effort will continue, and California would be very interested in continuing its work internationally. So without the United States, however, making continued progress on air pollution, which has been very, very significant over the last 50 years, will be much more difficult. As I mentioned, I grew up in Los Angeles, and the air quality in Los Angeles, even though there's a much bigger population in Los Angeles than when I was a kid, has improved very significantly. It would be a shame if that progress were lost, but California will continue its efforts. So with that, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning, and I look forward to hearing your progress here in South Korea. Thank you very much.
캘리포니아
It was a air quality improvement case from Mr. Ken Ellis. Please give him a big round of applause for his presentation. Next, let's continue to the next presenter. We have Mr. Dr. Shim Chang-sub, Senior Researcher at the Korea Environment Institute, and he will present the second topic. Good morning. I am Shim Chang-sub from Korea Environment Institute. And today I would like to talk about some of the policies related to air quality, like the formal presentation was about the US case about air quality. We are also in a very complex situation, and we have different systems that are established, and it is very difficult to make it simple to understand. And I have time constraint, so I will focus on what is very important. So please understand the situation. There are some air quality policies in Korea, and recent 10 years, if we look at the government situation, there are fine dust reduction. That is the priority subject of our policy. And it seems a little late. There's ultrafine dust that should be designated as a management, and it's been only 10 years since we started the management. It started in 2015 to start measurement. We managed ultrafine dust and we came up with measure, but the situation did not improve. And in 2019, Fine Dust Special Act was enacted, and that included comprehensive plan and fine dust management plan, and that was also implemented. And that was only 5 years ago. So situation was not improved, and that's why it's been only a few years we had focused on the implementation plan. And if we look from the region, central government is not the only one for implementation. We just heard about California case, and there are also local regional governments, and implementation of those governments are also important. Recently, there were only measures from metropolitan area, and there is our basic plan for air quality, and we have designated 4 different regions with bad air quality, and we came up with very detailed policies and strong policies for air quality improvement. And today also, it's been just not that long, but there were some accomplishment about the project. And if we want to lower the damage caused by air pollution, we have to focus on other things, and I will explain you that. if we look at the system of atmospheric environment, there is a Air Quality Conservation Act, and there is a comprehensive plan for air quality improvement, and this is established every 10 years. And recent, we have stronger standard for air quality, and there's also carbon neutrality issue, so this was reestablished. So after the reestablishment, our plan is to implement the system from 2023 to 2032. And the current government has made the plan, and I will skip this part. And there are major pollutants and the amount of pollutants. And by 2032, the amount of reduction are indicated here. And if we go into detail, if you look at the ratio of reduction, by 2032, NOx is very critical. We're planning to reduce about 45% of NOx, and also fine dust concentration. Our level is much worse compared to the US, and it used to be 18 micro, and we are planning to reduce this by a few more percent lower. And there are some criticism that it is very difficult to accomplish all this plan. But at that time, it was not about implementation plan. It was about possibility, and we focused on that. And we made our plan that this is possible to accomplish. And also the local government measures are the actual implementation plan. And let's see how we can actually accomplish. There are atmospheric environment conservation plan, and there are new plans and policies that had been established and added. So fine dust concentration had been improved, but other levels, NOx and VOCs, those complicated procedure of pollutants made our O3 contents worse. And it is very difficult to control the level of VOC. You know what is VOC? It's not methane. It is short-lived carbohydration, and it is very difficult to manage NOx and VOC, and they're very complex in terms of chemical, and it is very difficult to resolve this issue. So that's why we have included this in our key challenge. And also for industrial sites, we have our intention to reduce the number of industrial sites with pollutants. And also for transportation vehicles, we are also going with the carbon neutrality, and no pollution vehicle has been emphasized. I've been mentioned about VOC. Agricultural sector is also contributing to the fine dust concentration, so that has also been applied to this plan. And next is implementation plan of local government. Our plan had been implemented starting from 2020. There is metropolitan area and also central area, including Chungnam province. There is Busan, Ulsan, and Gyeongnam area, which is southeast area. And there's Yeosu, Gwangyang. Those are very critical source of emission, and that is a southern area. And we have capped the maximum amount of emission by each region. So specific plans are currently ongoing. The first plan will be completed soon, And by that time, fine dust concentration was about 23 to 25. The annual fine dust concentration was rather high. But during that time, our plan to 2024 was about 16 to 17. But if you look at the current situation, southern region and central region had accomplished the plan, and the central region and metropolitan region still hits the level 20. Korea's atmospheric environmental standard is 15, which was strengthened in 2018. Let's take a look at the trend of fine dust concentration. In case of ultrafine dust, we've seen the effectiveness from the improvement. This is shown by the performance improvement in Korea, but also from abroad. And there were also impacts from COVID-19 in 2019. All these comprehensively have contributed to the improvement. And if we look at the southeast area and southern area, these area had also been affected by the improvement. And there are also factors from other countries, and still metropolitan area and central area was not able to accomplish the goal. And we're also planning for the next initiative, and we had open discussion with people involved, and there were another target for each region. Of course, it is very difficult in terms of continuity, but we have the same direction. However, comprehensive plan is about possibility, but this one should consider the interest of different groups. So we have to consider all the situation of different group and organization. So there should be some negotiation. In these industrial sites, cap and trade is applied. There are some differences that can be generated if we consider the situation. And if you look at the metropolitan area, we are planning to accomplish 19 micro by 2025. And in terms of ozone, O3, it is very difficult to assess the level. And there are also low possibility of accomplishment, but we have made a statement to lower the ozone level of 8 hours, and we have to understand the situation of ozone. Central area is affecting central area and vice versa, so it is not that much different. Central area goal is also 15, and in case of southern area is targeting 12, which is the lowest target. And also southeast area is planning to accomplish 13. And if you look at the basic direction of all this, there are industrial sites. The 3 major industrial sites in Korea are managed by Ministry of Environment, and we are planning to reduce the substance gradually. And NOx and SOx will be decreased every year, and it will be very difficult. Harbor and non-road area will also be managed, and also illegal incarceration and ammonia emission, ammonia discharge from agricultural area will also be managed. Let's take a look at one of the example. I told you about the cap and trade system. If we look from different regions, starting from 26th to 2029, every year, the total amount of NOx will decrease. We need to accomplish this, as still, metropolitan area has no change. It's unfortunate, but population is growing in metropolitan area, and also industrial sites are increasing in metropolitan area, so it is very difficult to expect the level to go down in this area. Metropolitan area atmospheric environment management is difficult compared to other regions. And also, there are some benefits and some interest that can be gained. Compared to 2021, the number of premature deaths will reduce by 362, and that will also benefit us financially. And also, the number of people who prematurely die from fine dust will also decrease. Lastly, I would like to talk about our limitation and things that we need to consider and understand. Cap and trade system was very difficult when it comes to negotiation because industrial sites, they want to have more capacity, and it is all different depending on different industrial sites, but it can cost more budget. And also, it applies the same to the local government. They need bigger capacity. However, the Ministry of Environment has its goal to improve the atmospheric environment. So they want people to use the latest technology to reduce the emissions. So these two conflict. And because of cap and trade, if we give enough capacity, there won't be any trade happening. And for preemptive businesses, there is no actual benefit. Because of this situation, it is very complicated and very difficult to negotiate about the cap and trade because, like the former presenter had mentioned, it can differ depending on different value you have. And also, local government's intention, their will is also very important in Korea also. And as for this basic plan, we have quantitative assessment. Qualitative assessment or statement assessment cannot be evaluated, but if there is no calculation about the reduction that should be made, it is very difficult to get assessment. So for this part, local government or central government should make a realistic calculation plan. If not, Ministry of Environment or other departments should acknowledge the efforts that had been made by the businesses. And we still have a long way to go about the fine dust, but we still have to worry about ozone, and we need to have bold reduction about NOx. And also VOC, which is very difficult to decrease, should also become important factor that should be reduced. Thank you for listening.
네, 우리나라 대기환경 정책 방향에 대해서 발표해 주신 심창섭 연구원님께 다시 한번 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.
Next, We will start our panel discussion, but to organize the stage will take a 10 minutes break. Then now we'll start the panel discussion. We have panelists and keynote speakers. The moderator of the panel discussion is Kim Young-pyo, the former chair of the National Council on Climate Air Quality. Hello, everyone. I am currently the researcher at the Climate Research Institute. Chungcheongnam-do is a area where that represents climate efforts and carbon neutrality efforts. It is at the front line and at the front of making efforts and leading the direction for better air quality and carbon neutrality. And it is my great honor to be moderating this panel discussion. It's going to be 15 minutes of panel discussion, and we have 7 panelists with us. So everyone will please limit your presentation within 7 minutes. And everyone, please use your interpretation device to listen to your preferred language. So we'll start from the most left hand, or we can start from the researcher Kim Kyung-hwan. Hello, everyone. Please keep your time. Hello, I am Kim Kyung-hwan from the Korea Institute of Science and Technology. It is my great privilege to be participating this event. And actually, I have been knowing Dr. Kim Jong-bum for a while. So in terms of air quality research, he has been putting efforts to improving air quality for Chungcheongnam-do. And as Dr. Shim said, over the last 5 years, we have seen the great improvement in our air quality. Yet, we haven't made much progress on ozone quality. In that sense, not only the central government but also the local governments have to move faster than now. So this year, September, I went to Japanese air quality conference, and we talked about PM 2.0 concentration level, 2.5 concentration level, and most of the areas fulfilled 10 ppm per cubic meters. But currently, we see the increased risk in ozone quality. So I witnessed that there are a lot of efforts are being made to improve ozone quality. And oxidants in the atmosphere and aerosol and decreases. That means we'll have less primary source organic aerosol as well as ozone are coming from oxidants. So we'll need to make efforts to reduce oxidants. So VOC as well as oxidants need to be more researched, and that research is ongoing. And that research can be the evidence of a policy decision-making process. On that, I believe that there are much room for Chungcheongnam-do provincial government to do faster than the central government. But to that end, of course, as a researcher, I inevitably have concern over budget, but of course, to make policy decisions, we need to make science backing. So to have enough support, I hope to have a more R&D capability to make more backing and support for legislation and regulations. So I think that there's a need for that. And last year, I studied a fine dust matter in the Sejong city. My finding is that surrounding cities, surrounding local governments need to cooperate to improve Sejong city's air quality. Osong is close proximity to Sejong city, and these cities share the atmosphere. So if only the local government of the Sejong city makes an effort, it's not going to work. It's going to be limited. So if there is a concerning air quality area, then neighboring cities' cooperation is essential, and collaboration and joint projects and policy making are needed. That's all for me. Thank you. Thank you. He shared his perspective as a researcher. Next, we have Chat Pamitoi Tumia. 안녕하십니까? 저는 세콰이어 기후재단의 시즈핑 로 이사입니다. 저는 홍콩에도 있었고 지난 25년 동안 중국에서도 연구를 했었는데요. 저는 정부, NGO 그리고 전 세계에서 에너지 전환을
air pollution and climate change. Maybe I can start with the experience of Beijing, where I lived for 20 years and worked for 20 years. Beijing in 2008 organized the Olympic Games, and that was the time when the air quality of Beijing aroused public concern. Athletes were worried if the air quality is good enough for outdoor sports events, marathon running, etc. Since 2008, Beijing government make a lot of efforts in improving the air quality of Beijing. There are incremental steps that could be taken. For example, putting scrubbers to remove sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides from the chimneys of coal-fired power plants. For example, tightening the standard for exhaust gas emission of personal vehicles. These are all incremental measures that can help to improve air quality, but only to a certain extent. Ultimately, we know, all scientists know, air pollution comes from primarily the burning of fossil fuel, coal, oil, or gas for electricity, industries, or transport. So the only ultimate solution for ensuring we have fresh and clean air for our and future generation is to reduce and phase out the reliance on burning fossil fuels in our daily life. In fact, that has been the direction of Beijing, and Beijing as an example for the rest of China. Today, if you go to Beijing, we will no longer suffer the very serious air pollution that affected millions and millions of people in early 2000s and 2010s. So 10 years ago, we hear all these bad news story about air quality, air pollution in Beijing. But today, the air quality in Beijing have improved significantly. And it was precisely because of the city and the nearby provinces has reduced the burning of fossil fuel, coal, oil, and gas. Today, if you go to Beijing, you see a lot of the vehicles running on the road with a green car plate. They are new energy vehicles. The market penetration rate of electric vehicles in China nowadays is already more than 50%. So every 2 cars sold today, one of it will be new energy vehicles. So there are much less mobile sources on the road burning fossil fuel, polluting the air, and contributing to global warming. Also, Beijing today, its energy mix have no coal and very little gas. A lot of the electricity consumed in the Beijing municipal area is actually transmitted from Inner Mongolia and Hebei province by wind turbines and solar panels. That also helped to reduce the air pollutants emitting into the atmosphere by burning coal and natural gas. And lastly, the electrification of industrial production processes for the factories in and nearby Beijing area also helped to contribute to reduce, again, the reliance on coal for industrial production. Now, the successful experience of Beijing in dealing with its air quality issues while also helping to reduce carbon dioxide emitting into the atmosphere is a story that shows us not only it is possible in such a short time, in less than a decade, air quality can be improved while energy intensity can be reduced. In China, we call this co-control, controlling on the one hand air pollutants, on the other hand global warming gases. So the fundamental core of the strategy in China's co-control experience is to think about what is the long-term direction of how we want to organize our production and consumption. How are we going to power our electricity industries and transport system? In August this year, the central government have announced a very important framework policy. It's named under, it's called Comprehensive Green Transformation of Social and Economic Development. That basically says that China will keep progressing and accelerating its reduction of reliance on fossil fuel and increasing the supply of renewable energy into the energy mix and embracing this new era of clean technology that could not only help us to improve our air quality, but also to provide jobs and new growth opportunity for industries while securing a climate resilient future. Thank you.
예, 고맙습니다. 그 중국, 특히 베이징의 그
China, especially Beijing, the efforts to reduce the carbon emission, and we also heard about the atmospheric quality. And there was huge improvement from China. Of course, Korea has made improvement, but China was very successful, and thank you for sharing. And now let's hear from Tumiwa Fami, Director of Institute for Essential Service Reform.
And thank you for Chungnam government for inviting me to speak in this event. I have to admit that learning from the earlier presentations, I think Indonesia should learn from Korea and China in dealing with air pollutions. I'm living in Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, one of the largest city, and the largest city in the country, 24 million populations, and been living there for more than 22 years. I will start with a story like last year. Actually, my youngest son has to stay in the hospital for more than 2 weeks because of he exhaled the polluted air in Jakarta. And can you imagine, it's not only happened to my son, but happens to thousands of people living in Jakarta. During that period, I think from June to around August, September last year, there are thousands of people that has to be admitted in the hospital with the respiratory problems. And so it's not, it's really, you see that thousands of people in the hospital, some with a very serious acute respiratory problem. In fact, the government react to this issue, the national government reacted to this issue because of our president had a health problem because of this, the air pollutions. And he ordered one of the senior ministers to actually address this issue, and the government established a task force. This is show that air pollutions actually affected everybody, including the top leaders. No one can escape from the impact of air pollution, and it could be very serious. So I just give you kind of some numbers why this air pollution issue is and the crisis in Jakarta, it's very significant. If we look at the impact of air pollution in Jakarta, based on number of research, that it's causing more than 10,000 premature death annually with this level of air pollutions. More than 5,000 hospitalization for cardiorespiratory disease each year, and more than 7,000 adverse health outcomes in children annually, including premature death and also stunting, which a government are really concerned of. So this is the impact only for Jakarta alone. And if you look at the economic costs, that the economic burden of air pollution in Jakarta is substantial. It is estimated that the total annual cost of health impact approximately to close to $3 billion annually. And this represents around 2.2% of Jakarta province gross regional domestic product. And if we look at this, that includes the cost of hospitalizations of people. So and there is also long-term consequences of the air pollutions, like life expectancy. Long-term resident can be reduced by 2.5 years, and non-infectious disease, and it's accounted around 79% in death in Jakarta in 2019 alone. So these kind of figures, which I think any government has to take significant effort to reduce because of health and economic impact. And if you look at the source of air pollution in the context of Jakarta, the first is from transportation, burning fossil fuels, burning fuels. It's actually emit a lot of pollutions, and this is around around 32 to 50% of the pollutions in the city. But also the contribution for coal plants is also quite significant in Jakarta. In the radius of 100 kilometers across Jakarta, there's a number of coal-fired power plants, and I think the number is around 16 coal-fired power plant within 100 kilometers, and this number already increased, double since 2018, and this contribute around more than 30 to 40% of air pollutions, especially PM 2.5. So dealing and industry activities also make a contribution. So what has been done to address this? Well, in the context of government policies, because of the jurisdiction, most of the policy that has been implemented is related with governing the air pollutions. So this is the jurisdiction of the subnational government in terms of provincial government. So try to reduce the emissions, the pollution source through a couple of measures. First, that the Jakarta governments increase the public transportation and try to reduce the volume of traffic get into Jakarta, because every day there are more than 20 millions of vehicles come to Jakarta from neighborhood area. Second, which also quite relevant, we see that the government, the provincial government established low emission zone, and so the number of low emission zone that actually restrict the vehicles to enter. And after a few years, we can see the improvement in the micro air quality in that area. The other, which also right now the central government has been trying to push, is to retire old coal-fired power plant. And there was, since last year, the government actually stated that they asked the national utility company to retire 1,600 megawatt of coal power plant that close in Jakarta, and push for other coal-fired power plant also to use technology to reduce the particulate matters and other pollutants. And the last one, which I also see right now, is to promote the use of electric vehicle. And we have seen that the number of electric vehicle increase in Jakarta, and also a Korean company, I think Hyundai, it's one of the famous brand in terms of electric vehicle, and we have seen that increase. But at the end, I think it's very important for the government to address air pollution based on the source of pollution itself, and come up with a stringent policy over time to reduce a social, health, and economic impact from the air pollution. Thank you.
예, 고맙습니다. 인도네시아의
Thank you very much. We've heard about the health-related cases and efforts that's been made by Indonesian government. Next, let's hear from Mr. Vice President Lee Hee-kwan. Hello. I am working in Incheon University Environmental Division, and today I am here on behalf of Korean Society for Atmospheric Environment. Yesterday, I also participated another event, which is also dealing with the same subject. And I think Incheon is not the only city that is concerned about this issue. And this had been already discussed, and currently there are many policies that are being established. And that means we need more budget. And most of them will have to be implemented by central government and local government. That's what you have mentioned. And if we want to make this more important, make the implementation more important, what about making private sectors to participate? They can contribute with their technology. They can make jobs and profits. And as I am in charge of these kinds of projects, I feel like the policies and technologies related should move together. So my first suggestion is making private sector to participate. Secondly, this is about my research field. I've just discussed with Mr. Kim, Dr. Kim, and he said there is no big harbor in Chungcheongnam-do. In case of harbors, it is very difficult to estimate the emission from harbor because what if ship from Incheon goes to other cities, and what if other cities ship comes to Incheon, and these ships go around everywhere, and it is very difficult to calculate and estimate the emission. With our current emission system, it is very difficult. And this is rather a past research, but we can utilize the ship movement information so that we can calculate the emission, so that Chungcheongnam-do can make a calculation for their atmospheric policy, and this can be a good basic material. And we are having our R&D project, which is related to this calculation, and I'm suggesting Dr. Kim to join this project. Lastly, I'm on behalf of Korean Society for Atmospheric Environment, and there are 4,000 members in our organizations, and many of them are from research centers and universities, and also there are foreign members in our group. And when I work in Incheon, it's very difficult to invite experts about this issue. And there are 4,000 members in Korea and abroad. And in the future, I hope our members can also participate in this discussion process because all of us are willing to participate and contribute. So please feel free to talk to our members. Thank you.
연구자 입장.
Thank you very much. You shared your perspective as a researcher, institute, and a government. So next, we will hear from Kim Jong-bum. Hello, everyone. I am Kim Jong-bum from Chungnam Institute. So every presenters previously talked about their perspectives as a researcher institute. So as I work for Chungcheongnam-do province government, I will talk about Chungcheongnam-do. As Lee Hyugan shared, I have been involved in this institute in 2016, but it is my first time participating in this kind of a conference, so sharing insights and hearing from experts and subject matter experts, it's really timing. Because we don't have this scale of a conference, it would be great to think about how we can more organize this type of conferences. So today, my presentation is evolved into 6 points. First, when we talk about air quality, we mostly talk about concentration and volume. But currently our policy is based on caps. So about 5 to 6 years of data shows that Chungcheongnam-do decreased emissions by 34%, the largest among nationwide. So where is it coming from? We reduced mostly from the industrial complexes. Of course, thanks to officials and government and of course industrial people. But even though these kind of efforts, we still rank the 4th in terms of the emissions. So we decreased a lot, but still we emit a lot. So to continue our efforts, we need continued support. As Ken Alex from UC Berkeley said, when a policy is made and proceeded, and when there is a change of leadership, there's some impact on the policies. So I hope that we can continue to proceed with this direction, regardless of the leadership change. And another thing is Seosan, Tangjin, Cheonan, and large industrial complex need to be managed and controlled because they generate VOCs, and we need to reduce the VOCs around that area. And the target is PM10, PM2.5 VOC, NOx, SOx, and most of the materials are reaching our target, but PM2.5 and VOCs are lacking to reach the target. So there's some, it's not going as we want. So in order, I believe that we need to manage the secondary source, and there are some policies around the VOCs, but it's not comprehensive. So TSB touches upon NOx and SOx, but not the VOCs. So in terms of reduction efforts and reduction policies are lacking. So we need to evolve more policies around the VOX. Then, as I said, we need to manage more of the secondary sources. Also, we need to manage ozones. So our standard is 8 hours of concentration. Current target performance is 20%. But as Chim said, by 32, 50% concentration per hour, but currently it's 20%. But if we go for 8 hours of concentration, then it's only 0.2%. So we cannot just say that, oh, we are lower than the limit, but it is increasing continuously. And especially the underserved people, especially seniors and younger people, are exposed to this ozone and other hazards. So we need to be more aware of and take care of this kind of monitoring and management of the ozone quality. And in addition, we'll also need to pay more attention to the agriculture industry. First, industrial area, Cheonan, Asan, Tangjin, Taean, coal power plants, chemical, petrochemical industry. And the second area of Chungnam is Gaeryong and more of a agriculture suburban areas and Gongju. But what I want to say is that most of the policies are centered around large areas, Busan, and large metropolitan cities. So when we proceed with policies, we put more emphasis on vehicles. So not much policies around the agriculture industry. But when we look at the concentration level, ammonia and carbon dioxide are emitted from these suburban areas. but these are outside of the eyes from the central government. Ammonia are coming from the feedstock and agricultural lands. They have their, it can also pose a threat to public health, and will need to take care of those chemicals and pollutants. From 2025, we'll start our policy regarding air quality, and that will include some of the feedstock parts. It's still in the research phase, so who's going to take care of, who is going to manage is not yet determined, but we'll continue to pay attention to develop right policies. And lastly, of course, we see a lot of policies developed for air quality improvement, but in 2003, we have a metropolitan air quality policy around the Seoul, Gyeonggi, and that also saw some great performance. So in 2016, when we had issues in fine dust problem, we started to apply this to nationwide. Daejeon, Sejong, Chungnam, Chungbuk, 5 areas as a middle part of a Korean peninsula is also part of the air quality policy. So most of these middle areas show similar pattern, but in terms of other cities, the bottom part of the cities show different patterns per city. Seosan, Dangjin, Cheongyang, Gaeryong, Dangjin, and all these little areas around the middle part of the Korean peninsula show different pattern. But currently, they are all tied as one area for air quality management. So what I want to say is that we need to be more specific to the particular area. And it is currently managed at the city and district level. So in terms of a seasonal or contingency or emergency situation, we will have to be more specific around our policy. So and also the performance of or the effect, positive effect from the policy is different per city, because Busan and metropolitan area have more vehicles. So when this act is applied, they see more impact. But without car in this near area, this middle part of the area, we cannot move around without car because of lack of public transportation. So if we don't use car, it's going to be around 2 hours if I have to take a public transportation, which will be take only a few minutes by car. So we need to consider more area-specific characteristics when we apply these kind of policies. Thank you. So many of the characteristics about Chungcheongnam-do and various features are addressed. Yes, all good, but all in all, it is up to capability of the local government, of course, budget, as well as how planning and execution of a plan is done. So how we can better manage the capability of the local government as well as its personnel is going to be important as well. So is there any opinion from the presenters? And maybe we can hand over our mic to the audience if not. Keynote speakers, do you have any comment, Alex?
It's very interesting to me how similar the circumstances are described in Beijing, in Chunam, in other parts of Korea, and in California. And what I would say is that there is difficulty in ratcheting down the requirements around emissions, but that when it's done, whether it's for mobile sources or stationary sources, it's effective. And over time, we've seen that in every location where emission requirements have been put in place. Los Angeles, as I mentioned, is an excellent example. Air quality has improved dramatically. We just heard that Beijing's air quality has improved quite a bit. And I would say that's true everywhere we've seen actual requirements and regulation put into place. It's not easy because, of course, businesses and companies are not always supportive of taking those measures. But when it occurs, it is effective, and it has such huge health benefits. So I encourage you to continue on this path.
예, 고맙습니다. 심창섭 선임연구원님. 네, 저도
Yes, I also enjoyed listening to the panelists. Since there's time limitation, I will just point out two things. As a researcher, I am working with the government about the implementation plan, and there are some things that I have learned during this process. Actually, in order to make implementation all the way to the government in local area, governance is very important because stakeholders, they are always related and linked to the initiative. Of course, central government is holding the budget, but when it is implemented, there's local governments and there's governance, and the will to governance is also very important. And if you look at the system, what you see is very important. Systems, plan, they're important. But if you want to make actual performance, the will and leadership of stakeholders are very important. Those are invisible. Like Vice President mentioned, participation of members are still lacking. And if we implement the policy, not just central government, but also in private sector, there are organizations that are applied with regulation, and they also need to participate. And we have to let people know that they are also participating to get consensus. Because it is very difficult for researchers and economists. And I think that's why the role of private sector is important. And I would like to take this opportunity to emphasize that. Lastly, we have discussed about outside air, but most of you stay inside most of the time. And because of the weather condition, you prefer staying inside. So we're exposed to indoor air. Last year, in the National Assembly, there were food cafeteria issue. The workers who are working in food cafeteria in school are exposed to carcinogen because of their environment, and their environment should be improved, and that's why it has been dealt with the National Assembly. So I hope people know about this matter more, and we can make improvement with the inside air. In order to do that, we have to have more interest and attention. Thank you very much. Like it's been said by the panelists and presenters, there's role of central government and local government. And also there are differences of perspective between those stakeholders, and consensus with stakeholders are very important. Society is changing, and information spreads out very fast, and conflict is exacerbating. And when there's severe conflict with each other. We need to have this consensus and agreement. And we need to have governance in order to do that. And that should be based on information, based on science. And it is no longer about central government leading the initiative anymore. It is about central government providing the answer with scientific evidence. As it should also come up with the benefit and effect to people when it's done. It will take time, but the implementation, if it's rightfully done, if it should be rightfully done, management is important. Information management is important. In order to do that, we need government officials like Chungcheongnam-do officials and also scientists' efforts. And I will open the floor. I will give an opportunity to participants for questions. Please state your name and your position. Hello, I am from Dangjin, Seoul Light Metal, and I have a question to Ken Alex. Currently, you have mentioned about California and LA, their atmospheric environment, and you said there should be regulation to make improvement. And was there an effect on employment? Did regulation made any effect on employment? And also, it seems like Indonesia and China made environmental improvement recent 10 years, but I think the US is 10 years earlier, so that's why I'm asking you, Mr. Alex. And when there's a regulation, did it affect the job opportunity? And after a few years, did job market got better? And if you have time, I mean, depending on the value of the president, the environmental direction changes. You mentioned about Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. I am also in the environmental sector, and if you work in the sector, everything is numbers. And why do you think they interpret these numbers differently?
On the first part of it, whether regulations impact employment, California's experience is that as environmental regulation has increased and actually had a significant impact in improving the environment, that its economy has grown substantially. California, standing alone, apart from the United States, is the 5th largest economy in the world. And over the last 20 years, where most of the greenhouse gas regulation has been put into place, it has grown faster than the rest of the United States. So one way to think about that is, as you have regulations, you actually sometimes create new jobs and new industries. There's a whole strata of people who work on pollution regulation. There's people who work on technology related to those regulations and requirements, and I'm sure you see that here in South Korea as well. So I used to work for Governor Jerry Brown, and he used to talk about regulations done well. There are regulations that create too much red tape and bureaucracy and cause problems, but there are also regulations, when they're done well, that reduce pollution and improve employment situations. And so it's a constant balance that has to be done well. In terms of why some politicians don't believe science. I'll interpret that as the way as your question. Unfortunately, I would say that it's sometimes for some politicians it allows them to provide a simple answer that sometimes people like to hear. For example, I think with climate change and all of the impacts of climate change, that it's people sometimes like to hear, well, if we just ignore it, it'll all go away. That sometimes creates the ability of in the short term to stay in power. And I'll stop there.
예, 고맙습니다. 또
Thank you.
Any other question or comments to make? Here. I am from Gongju University researcher, and I have a question to Ken Alex as well. Industrial people and people in the transportation as well as agriculture, when there is a regulation in reduction of emissions, we follow that. But after the COVID-19, there are a lot of changes in our society as well as the economy and consumption behavior can have an opportunity to be better. So, for example, if there is, I see a decreased efforts to make any efforts to decrease carbon emissions in consumption behavior. So compared to 4 to 5 years ago, I see decreased efforts in that part, meaning consumption behavior improvement to reduce carbon emissions. So I believe that kind of efforts should be revived. What about Los Angeles, California? Is this similar? I see that kind of a pattern in Korea, but what about LA and California? Another question is this kind of campaign. Do you have any cases of that kind of campaign, consumption pattern, carbon decrease?
Short answer is yes, there are ongoing efforts to change consumption attitudes, consumption behavior, whether it be perhaps eating less meat, less red meat, for example, that has potential impacts that are quite extensive. There's efforts. I note that South Korea has a green credit card, which I think is pretty interesting, that I'd like to see the U.S. adopt, that promotes the idea of consumption around green products. So there's a fair amount of thought trying to change consumption patterns, and there's you probably have similar things in South Korea around what is called corporate ESG, environmental and sustainable governance. And so I think that there is an ongoing effort to get consumers to use their purchase power to change the conduct both of themselves and of companies that work with them. I think it's going too slowly, and that probably at least as much effort needs to be done about cutting emissions, but consumer attitudes is certainly part of it.
네, 미국의
So the U.S., the EPA thinks the citizen participation is very important. For example, measurement and any other protection of the environment, EPA thinks the citizen participation is very important. And according to global institutions, energy consumption and any other areas where emits carbon it takes part of only 2/3, 1/3 of the efforts to reduce carbon emissions, meaning individual efforts is of course important, but what's more important is that central governments and local governments have to make more stringent policies to step up the carbon emission targets. And so we all have to ask more efforts to local and central governments to reduce and cast your vote as well. Any other question? Because we are reaching the lunchtime, I think people are feeling tired. We have 5 to 10 minutes left. But if there's no question from the floor, I'd like to extend my appreciation to the audience for listening attentively. And thank you very much, all the presenters and participants. Thank you. And all the insights will be a great help in making of the policy to improve air quality of Chungcheongnam-do. And I want to extend my appreciation to all the participants, presenters, and panelists. And I want to make a comment. Dr. Kim Jong-wan remarks was very meaningful. So we were ranked fourth in terms of the carbon emissions, but we are now better because of all the help and efforts made by the local citizens and local industry people. So now we'll move on to the commemorative photo session. Please come to the stage to take a commemorative photo.